Okay, I hope everybody can see my screen. So thank you so much for letting us talk here today. Thank you to the GRIMMCon team for putting all this together. It's a huge undertaking if you've ever done an event like this. So really appreciate it. And thank you so much for letting us chat with you today. My name is Trisha Howard, aka Trisha Kicks Sass, and our session today is It's Broke. Let's fix it. So we're going to do just very short little intros here, and then we're going to kick it off. So happy to be sharing the stage with two women in InfoSec that I respect so much. Again, like I said, my name is Trisha Howard. I am the content marketing manager at Guardicore, and I have a very non-traditional path into security, so I'm really excited to talk about this today.
And I am Stephanie. I am a level 2 security analyst at Duo for Cisco. And I'm also excited. This is my first keynote, so hopefully you all don't run screaming.
I'm Casey. You can find me on Twitter at Varcha, and I'm a cybersecurity engineer. Really excited for what we have in store today, so I hope you guys enjoy it.
Awesome. So we all know the saying, I'm pretty sure, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it makes sense. It's a trope, right, for a reason. We do tend to over-engineer things. Just in case you were wondering, it isn't always necessary, sorry. But the problem with this is that we've been taking this same approach of if it ain't broke, don't fix it to the cultural problem in InfoSec. And newsflash, it is broken, like a lot. We have a lot of self-indulgent and self-perpetuating habits that actually hurt our ability to do our job and why we're actually here. So we end up with this situation, the Band-Aid on a bullet hole. And the problem with that is that we're treating the symptom, we're not treating the problem. And the problem is that we have a cultural issue at the cornerstone of InfoSec. We're supposed to be creating solutions, and what we end up doing is creating more problems instead by trying to put Band-Aids on it. So we know what the problem is, but we need to examine the why and how to fix it. And that's kind of what we wanted to talk to today. So we need to start by remembering what we actually do here. So I got to be honest with you, when I first got into security, I actually really wanted to be a CISO. I thought this is just such a cool job. Like, oh my goodness, the things that they do, the impact that they have, like, wow, what an awesome job. And I got to be honest, the older that I get, and the more CISOs that I meet, the further away from that I get, because it is such a tough industry. It's such a tough job. And I'm InfoSec adjacent in marketing, and I still feel it. So why do we do what we do, right? We have to remember that. And the reason is we do it for people, right? We do it to make people safer online. We do it to secure people. We don't do it to gatekeep, or rather, we shouldn't be doing it to gatekeep. So it's hard enough to get people into the industry because of the type of high stress and mentality that goes along with it. And when you add a toxic environment on top of that, no wonder we can't get people to stay, right? So we need to look at people with diverse and non-technical backgrounds, for instance, which will be talked about much more later. But it can be super easy to forget why we do what we do. And it's a really good reminder. Having a sticky note, for instance, of somebody who's non-technical, a friend, family member, and having like their name like on your desk. This is why you're doing what you're doing, right? Yes, of course, the tech is cool. Yeah, we all love the technology, but we do this for the people, and we really need to remember that is true.
But first, we have to acknowledge what we're dealing with right now as it exists. We have a lot of problematic activities or behaviors in our industry that kind of get in the way of accomplishing what Trisha was talking about. So not listening or thinking we're better than other people, that's definitely something that I have done myself, but also I've seen done in this industry as well. Claiming to know more than others and kind of waving it around as a badge of honor, that's definitely something that's been done as well. And we do this to our customers and our team members. And also saying no before giving people and ideas a chance. We often will shut things down if we don't understand them or if we don't see the point. And that kind of alienates people with different backgrounds or ideas that are just kind of outside of the status quo. And in general, all of that leads to not being a team player, which kind of puts us in this weird us versus them kind of scenario where we alienate people and we kind of disclude a lot of people.
So what do we end up getting? We're here in the industry to create and develop solutions to solve problems that we see and that we want to be a part of the solution for. What we end up with as a result of everything that Steph and Trisha have talked about is an industry where we're working with a huge gap of people, and we need more help, and we need more people to join the industry. We need more diversity of thought, and you guys hear it all the time. We all hear it all the time, but we truly need it because we've all seen the applications and solutions and capabilities that come out, and within hours, we see from the community the people who can't use them because there were gaps in how we went about creating the solutions. Further, we end up with solutions that don't actually solve the problems that we're trying to solve. So we don't pay attention to the specific problem enough and learn it and understand the users and the people who are going to be impacted by it enough to create a solution. That's really what we want.
Very, very true. And I'm so excited to talk about this because on a personal note, teaching is part one, and it's kind of how I've gotten to where I have in InfoSec. So one of the things we need to be doing is we need to be teaching to educate and inspire, not to feed our own egos. Like Casey mentioned, you know, we end up with these solutions that don't actually solve the problem, and it's because we're not teaching to educate and inspire people. We're teaching to make ourselves feel better. So for those of you who don't know me, my degree is actually in the theater arts, and I fell into security completely on accident. And the reason I bring this up is because I realized pretty early on in my tech and security career that I learned things a lot differently than the really technical people. And I became to embrace that, and instead of looking as like less than, I was able to take something, super high level concepts, and be able to bring them to more of the non-technical people because that's how I learned, right? Now I'm a very big like self-study person. I also really like to get my hands dirty, so to speak, which is probably why almost every single picture of me from college, I'm like covered in paint from working in the scene shop. But it really became clear whenever I started coaching a team. So we talk a lot about different learning styles, but that means we need different teaching styles as well. And, sorry, I'm losing my horn here. So we need to be not only addressing the different teaching styles, we need to be making them more available to people. I got into a discussion on Twitter with a mutual the other day talking about content creation, which of course is what I do. So I was like really, I was a little biased here. But the question was posed, okay, every time I go to like make a video or make a blog or something, I think, well, somebody's probably already done it before me. So what's the point of me doing it? And my answer then is my answer now. If you have not created it, it doesn't exist yet. Even if it's a topic that somebody else has talked about a million times, you are the only person who has your unique experiences. And that unique experience might reach somebody that wouldn't normally understand or wouldn't normally even be aware of this. So when we talk about teaching, it's not just teaching internally. It's not just, you know, knowledge sharing externally either. It's about hiring. It's about really cultivating a team. And that's where we get the inspiration part of this. So again, people have different learning styles, and that's not just okay. It should be embraced and endorsed, which comes down to communication. So as an artist, my job, my entire life has been to communicate, whether it's been either literally verbally saying lines or communicating a change of day within a lighting design, or painting something to communicate a feeling or thought. That's what artists do. And this is another good example of why we need to be having people from different backgrounds come into technology, because we traditionally, as InfoSec, are not super great at communicating outside of each other. We're great at talking to each other. We love our jargon and acronyms, don't we? But that doesn't like resonate to somebody who doesn't live and breathe this every day. So bringing in other people who have different backgrounds. And see, I say it all the time. The techies speak in ones and zeros, and I speak in unicorns. And that's critical. If you've ever been on the pre-sale side in any way, shape, or form, whether it literally be sales or sales engineering, you've probably had conversations with customers that have said, hey, can you come and talk to my board, or can you come and talk to my C-levels, because they're not understanding why I need this. And that's why we need other people in the room, right? The technical skills are awesome, but they are not the be all end all. If you can't communicate what your product does effectively, you're not going to sell anything, which means you don't make money, which means you're out of a job, right? If you can't communicate why you need a certain tool to make your job easier, to make your organization more secure, then you're going to continue suffering on without it. And this also moves into hiring as well. There's like this whole meme, right, about how the hiring managers don't know how to post InfoSec roles. That's on us. That's on us. We can't communicate what we need, and we can't communicate what's realistic. And realism is a huge form of effective communication that I think we could be doing a lot better at, because in the industry itself, we expect only unicorns in a field of humans and then get upset when they're human. So communication is really big, which drops in to the next point. It's time to drop some E. It's time to roll with some empathy. One of the things I love about InfoSec Twitter is that the community is, while it has its issues, of course, genuinely has some amazingly empathetic people. Security, I said it before, it's a rough profession, right? It's brutal on the mental health. It's brutal with burnout. And we are hard on ourselves because of it, and other people. And we really need to be bringing in that empathetic level whenever we are talking about our coworkers and hiring and everything else. In the spirit of being open and all that. This is something I've actually struggled with quite a bit. If you don't know anything about the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 3. It's basically, the Enneagram is basically like a more personal version of the Myers-Briggs, but the 3 is a workaholic who is feelings repressed and only cares about what they perceive success to be. And the reason I bring this up is because for a long time in my career, it was really hard for me to understand where other people were coming from, because I perceived that they had a lower work ethic than me, or that they were lazy or something like that, and thus reacted that way. And when I finally realized and got some other people around me that I'm very fortunate to have around me who think so differently than me and react to things so differently than me, I was able to bring that empathy into not only my job, but my personal life. It made me a better friend. It made me a better employee, and it made me better at my job. Because when we are not empathetic, we are super narrow-minded, and narrow-mindedness does not work well in tech or security. It's completely antithetical to innovation, which is what we have to do all the time. So imagine if you were a physical pen tester and all you did was try and get in the front door every single time. You're probably not going to be as successful as somebody who thinks to go into the window, right? So we need to be bringing this empathy level because it will not only make you a better person, but you're missing a huge part of your job and your market if you're not being empathetic, because you're only communicating to those who think like you.
Well said, Trisha. Yeah, so my portion of this talk is definitely going to talk about inviting and including people into this space. So along that same vein of empathy and making sure you exercise it, you also have to make sure that you are creating an environment that is inclusive, but that comes with kind of challenging yourself and some thoughts you may be having that you're not sure you're having. So next slide. So everyone judges a book by its cover. When I was younger, I tended to go for books with really interesting covers, dragons, or like some pretty girl on there, or like some girl that looked like me, or whatever had you. There had to be something eye-catching, and that's the book that I would read. And I was a heavy reader when I was younger. So can you imagine how much literary gold that I bypassed just by doing that? How many things I didn't read because it just didn't look good, or it looked outdated, or like, before my time. In that same way, we as humans tend to judge everything based on our experiences and what we've come across before. And it's not completely our fault. We tend to go towards the familiar as a survival tactic. It's if I know what to expect, even if it's not the best thing, I'm at least safer because I know what to expect, as opposed to this other thing that could immediately kill me upon interaction. So an issue that we have in this industry is the tendency to judge a book by its cover. Sometimes not even just the cover, but the background as well. Some of that comes from implicit or unconscious bias. What is implicit bias? The term was introduced in 1995 by Mazarin Banaji and Anthony Greenwald. Specifically, implicit bias refers to attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious way. So it makes them difficult to control because we're not consciously doing it, but our brain is often processing stuff in the background, much like a machine is, where we sometimes make decisions that we don't really understand, but because we came up with them, we kind of trust them. But sometimes those could be preventing other things from occurring. They could be preventing other people from getting into the industry because we just don't understand them, or they're not familiar. What does that tell us is that we often judge candidates or tech hopefuls without actually taking them in on an individual case-by-case basis. 95% of brain activity is unconscious, which means when we're on autopilot, we're being controlled by whatever preconceived notions our brains have processed. Most of our choices are impulsive, emotional, take little to no effort, just like the graphic kind of shows, and are just gut reactions, like I said, that come from thoughts we haven't questioned or examined in a long time. Sometimes we hold beliefs that we've held since we were kids, and we just kind of stick with it because we haven't really challenged them ourselves, or an experience hasn't challenged them. Next slide, please. Along that same line, oh, go back a slide. Along that same line, we tend to choose what is familiar, which goes along with what I said about survival instinct. Think about it this way. The familiar is something we've seen before, predictable, easy, simple. Me personally, I tend to go towards familiar foods. I'm not the most adventurous when it comes to food. And think about all the food that there is out there in the world. I'm from Houston, and Houston has like crazy amounts of food from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of ethnicities, all kinds of cultures. And there's a lot of things that I wouldn't have tried if somebody hadn't exposed me to them. So even on that very basic level, thinking about just what we're missing by not considering something that's outside of our comfort zone. In that same way, during the interviewing and hiring process, sometimes you can stick to the stats that you're used to, like a higher GPA, or coming from certain schools, or even coming from certain high schools, or some sort of sports background, or some sort of popular university. Like, I think there are lots of reasons why people pick what's safe. They pick what seems to be the safest choice, but then you end up missing out on folks that are a lot more suited for the position, or could add a perspective that you just never knew about. So when you reject the unfamiliar or the unknown, you're not necessarily going with the best choice. You're just going with the choice that you understand. And our understanding, if you are in security, is very limited. You learn new things every day that change the way that you operate as a security professional. In that same vein, you should be very concerned about making sure that your teams are equipped to handle different scenarios that might come your way that you're not familiar with. Also, how many times have you stayed in a toxic work environment because you're afraid of the unknown? Or how many times did you renew with a problematic security vendor because you didn't want to deal with the unknown? And also, in those two situations, you definitely were familiar with what was happening, but it didn't necessarily make it the best choice for you. So making sure we think about that when it comes to interviewing and hiring is definitely important. When I first joined the industry, I was truly excited, just kind of like what Trisha talked about earlier. I was really excited, and all I wanted to do was sit at the feet of Linux masters and learn my little heart out. And it was immediately apparent that I wasn't nerdy enough or manly enough to fit in. I had to literally prove my worth every single day. And at first, you know, if you feel insecure, you kind of just like go with it because you're like, yeah, I am a dweeb, but I don't even know anything. So yeah, sure, teach me everything. But as you start to learn and realize that everyone's learning, you start to realize that the treatment's kind of unfair, and it doesn't have anything to do with your aptitude. It doesn't have anything to do with your skill set. It doesn't even have anything to do with your worth. So when I went through that, I just felt kind of insecure about where I stood when it came to this, and that affected my work ethic, which people kind of said, oh, you're not passionate enough now. You're because we've kind of made you feel alienated because you're not nerdy enough. You've kind of drifted back, and now you're not passionate enough. So no matter what I did, I could never win. And I think because of unconscious bias, we tend to invite those we are familiar with and exclude those that we are not used to. And we don't do it subtly sometimes. Sometimes we really do say, like, you're not this enough, you're not that enough. And in this graphic, I definitely used a quote from Steve Jobs that has been shoved down my throat. I'm pretty sure it's been shoved down a lot of people's throat. There are so many graphics of this quote on Google. And then also having the you cannot sit with us mindset or attitude, and the He-Man woman haters club kind of mentality of like, this is the boys club and we don't want to make uncomfortable jokes because the girls in the room. Those kinds of things kind of affect the environment that we're all in. And it affects how people show up. So even a person could be passionate, but all the other stuff has kind of gotten in the way of them showing that. Imagine going for runs. If it was raining during hurricane season and you're not in the eye of the storm, it's going to be a lot harder to go on that run. And is there going to be somebody in a car, you know, or an umbrella saying, hey, you're not passionate enough because you're not running through all of this? No. So why do we do that when it comes to this industry? Why do we make it hard for folks to be here and we don't include them? We make it an exclusive club, and then we villainize them for it, or say they're not passionate enough, or they're not something enough. Next slide, please. The stats are here, and the stats have been here over and over. People have highlighted what being inclusive really gets us. And according to this, we would be 6 times less likely to be innovative, 2.3 times lower cash flow per employee over a 3-year period, and 42% more likely to leave jobs within a year. So it seems that even though people have stuck to their guns and said, no, this is an exclusive club, and if you don't fit the criteria, you can't come in, it actually benefits us to open our doors and be inclusive. It benefits us to allow somebody to take us to a new restaurant and show us new foods. It benefits us to have different friends that show you what different cultures have, and you can incorporate some of those tenets or values in your own life. It benefits us to learn from our neighbors, and it benefits us to include everyone in the equation. And then something I want to say is it kind of affects our technology. If we don't have everybody in the room building these things, then we end up making something that is useless for major portions of the population. Technology sometimes doesn't factor in people with disabilities or people with different skin tones or even people with different hair types. As I stand here today, earlier this year, getting on the plane, I still had to have my hair patted down. And I've had to have my hair patted down in every trip. There's been no hairstyle that I've had where I haven't had the machine flag something in my hair because of my hair texture. And I feel like that in 2021 is very strange. How can we say that we're making great technology? How can we say that we're the best when we don't even factor things because of the people in the room? There's nobody in the room with my hair texture, so nobody's going to fix a scanner to account for curlier hair texture or kinkier hair texture. So you see how something that has been used and is used and everybody deals with it is kind of mediocre because it doesn't account for large portions of the population with my hair texture. So when we're inclusive, if we want to take away all the fluffy stuff and just focus on this, we can just say that, yeah, it's useful to be able to have an inclusive culture because it makes our technology greater, and then also makes people want to stay, and it's good for business. Next slide, please. With that being said, let's try to be more inclusive. Get in, losers, we're changing the industry.
Thanks, Steph. So well said. So with all that being said, how are we solving the problems that we're here in the industry to help with? So there are actually a lot of things that we as information security professionals like to pretend that we know, when if we really think about it, we don't know as well as we think we do. So let's start with users. And Steph just talked about some really relevant stuff here. When we pretend to understand our user base, what we end up creating isn't solutions that are solving the problems we're here to help with. What we're creating is something that we hope solves some sort of problem somewhere. And that's a problem because we know as professionals in the industry that the problems we're trying to solve actually need really specific, tailored solutions a lot of the time, and they need better solutions than what we have right now. We need to understand our users if we're going to understand what we're trying to solve. We're not here to build things that don't have an impact or a purpose. We're here to help make the industry better and make the world better, because if we don't do it, no one else is going to do it. We're here to make stuff more secure. So we need to pay attention to what our users need. And this means having testers beyond just the people building our product on our team, and having testers that do include all sorts of types of people with backgrounds and skin types and everything that it may be, such that when we put out a solution, we're not suddenly missing major portions of the population. That's the problem. Risk. Some of us like talking about risk, some of us not so much. It often comes through numbers that we throw around, often to leadership. We might say, hey, here's what our risk level is right now, and if you give us the money to buy these tools and to implement this and that, we can lower it to this number. And there are a couple of problems when we do that. The first one is that we know that these numbers are essentially arbitrary. They really don't mean anything. And what we're doing when we pretend that they mean something and express them to leadership or anyone else who's listening to us is we're pretending to be sharing information and to help them understand the security problem we're dealing with, but we're not actually helping them understand it. We're sharing information that doesn't mean anything. Further, when inevitably every company ends up getting hacked or breached and something goes wrong, leadership comes back and says, hey, you said we lowered our risk. Why did this happen? And we know that unless the risk is zero, which it's never going to be, there was still a chance of something happening. So when we kind of use terms and words and numbers that really don't mean anything, we're missing a big part of it. So we need to pay attention to that and talk about the things that do matter. Threat. We all know the saying, my threat model is not your threat model. And we're pretty good at knowing that and taking that into account in our own work, in our own work environments. We know what we're trying to protect against in our day-to-day life and what we're building for and what we're trying to detect and keep out. However, as soon as we're asked to go help someone else, we run over and we start saying, why are you doing this? And why are you doing this way? And why aren't you doing that? And we don't stop and say, whoa, we just jumped the fence. We went from my environment and my experiences that I'm used to someone else's. And it's going to be different. It's going to be a different environment with different priorities and different users and different functions that they need. And they're going to be non-negotiables that you need to understand. Otherwise, solutions aren't going to make sense there. So we need to be careful about that. Then we get to our actual solutions. What are we putting out there? And we'd all like to say, oh, the solutions we're building are going to change the industry and they're going to make everything better. But we really need to reconsider this. Unless you're the first one putting out a new type of tool, so if you're the first one to put out the first HIDS tool or maybe the first SIEM tool, sure, you're putting something new out there. But after that, we have years of people continuing to put out very similar tools, and some maybe aren't as great, but they're free, and maybe there's a really big price tag on the ones that work great, and then maybe eventually someone lowers the price of a really good one. But at the end of the day, they're all very similar, and there are two major things going on here. One, no one's actually putting them out saying this is going to 100% solve a problem. We put them out knowing that they're solving 50% of the problem, or that they're going to detect 50% of the threat, or at the very least, not detect all the threats. So we're putting out essentially incomplete solutions. And that actually does have an effect. Everyone who's going to buy and then implement our solutions has to then go do trade studies and figure out which one's worth buying. So when we just put out solutions to put out solutions, we're making it more difficult for the people who need to choose and implement them to choose and implement solutions. And we're making that process take longer. So we do need to pay attention to that. And lastly, is the security that we're implementing, is it usable? So for users, we talk about people who are going to be directly working with whatever we're changing and whatever we're implementing. We need to make sure that it actually works for them. At the end of the day, things exist to serve a purpose. They don't exist to be secure. So if all we're doing is adding security, but making it impossible for functions to do their job and to work in the timely manner they need to, and to provide users with the functions that they need to, then we're just being a hindrance. That's not a security solution. That's a problem. And we need to pay attention to that. And we need to make sure that whatever solutions we put out are not just hindrances. So what are the things that we do need to care about? We need to care about our users. If we're going to put out solutions that are solving specific problems that we see, then we need to know who's going to be using our solutions. And at the end of the day, our users either directly work with the solutions we put out, they benefit from them, or they deal with the consequences of them. And whether there are benefits that we expect or there are consequences, potentially negative ones that we know could happen, we need to take all of them into account. Because if something goes wrong, we can't sit here and say, oh, we had no idea that really important personal information could potentially get leaked. We need to take responsibility for that, and we need to understand the impact that it's going to have on users immediately and down the road if something goes wrong. We also need to care about our team, because we've just spent a lot of time talking about how hard it is to bring the solutions to the table that are going to move the industry forward and really make big changes in ways. And if with our teams, we're not providing environments where they can really do their best and bring their best ideas to the table, we're hindering the ability even further of us as an industry to create those new solutions. So we need to pay attention to how hard we're working our people. How are we caring about them? How are we making sure that they're taking breaks and that they come back to the office or to work ready to take on the day and to have new good ideas? We need to support them, and we also need to make sure we're listening to their ideas. We simply don't have time to be ignoring ideas of these amazing people in the industry who are coming and offering us new thoughts and ways of trying to solve problems. And frankly, when we don't do that, we're pushing those people away. They're going to leave the industry, they're going to leave the company, they're going to leave your team, and we're going to be left having an even harder time solving the problems we're trying to solve. And lastly, the business. The people who are giving us the money that we need and the time and the space to implement the solutions that we know are going to help, we need to have good relationships with them. And this gets back into what we were talking about with risk. It can't just be high-level conversations that don't mean anything. Depending on the audience, we need to say actual information about how security works and what we need in order to build that relationship with them. If we don't do that, we're going to be left in a situation where there's just not trust, and as a result, there aren't resources allocated, and further, there aren't security solutions implemented that we know that we need. So we need to work at this together. Now, if you notice, none of the solutions that I just said and things that we need to focus on were technical. I didn't tell you what programming languages to use. I didn't tell you what tools to choose or how to run your SOC or what processes you need to implement. They're all people. They're people that we're either building the solutions with or the people that are going to be using our solutions. So we need to be better. And there are a couple of steps to doing that. First of all, we need to understand what we currently have. Where are users today? How do they interact with technology? And what are they going to expect from the solutions we put out? What skills does our team bring to the table? What do we have as a team that we could use to make something better? And what does the industry already have? Once we understand that, we can look and say, where are the gaps? Where do we need to create solutions that are going to actually fix problems that exist and not put out half solutions that are only solving half the problem, or putting out just alternative solutions that aren't really fixing much. As much as we like to harp on technical skills and really think about them a lot, they're only going as far as we understand the space that we are creating solutions for. Technical skills aren't going to get us anywhere if we don't understand exactly what the problem is that we're trying to fix and how we're going to fix it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Casey and Steph. That was just absolutely phenomenal, as we knew it was going to be. So one of the things that all three of us collectively came together when we were deciding how to approach this talk, we decided that we hated were these, super like talks about diversity and inclusion, and there's like nothing to do about it, because we've been having these conversations and things are still not great, right? So what we wanted to do was pull some homework together and some actual action items that can be taken. And wanted to start with catering to differences. And the reason we chose the word catering is because it's not just accepting differences, it's actually enabling them and working towards them. People from different industries, people from different backgrounds in all forms, we need to be catering to those differences, because otherwise you end up with a lot of people who feel out of place and don't feel like part of the team, and that's a big part of the problem in the industry.
We also need to care about people. Casey's slide said vomits people, but we actually need to care about them. We support them, we secure them. Therefore, they're a big portion of the people that we need to cater to, like Trisha was saying. Caring about people is the beginning of innovation. It's the beginning of just a new frontier. I feel like once we do that, we've really, really, really soared. So yeah, that's definitely it.
We need to ask questions. We need to ask questions related to what we're trying to solve, what we're trying to create a solution for. We need to ask our team members things, how they're doing, what they want to work on, what their skills are. We need to ask new team members, hey, how can we make this the right environment for you? Every time we make an assumption in tech, we're pushing ourselves backwards, honestly, and we're also probably pushing other people away. So we need to ask the right questions, and we need to not be afraid to do that.
Yes. And on that note, we need to be proactive about it, right? Not waiting for somebody else to do it or waiting for somebody else to ask us to do it. We really need to be proactive. To quote the New York City subway, like, see something, say something, right? If you find somebody who's outside of the industry that you think maybe could have a knack for it or has some sort of interest, reach out, be a mentor to somebody that you wouldn't normally, right? If you see somebody on your team that you feel or that seems uncomfortable, or a woman is getting talked over in a meeting, for goodness sakes, say something, right? Jump on top of it. Be proactive with the questions, the caring about people, all of this. We have to be much more proactive because we're stuck in a reactive cycle in InfoSec.
Also, play the long game. If you're thinking that listening to our keynote for 45 minutes is going to change any kind of unconscious bias, it is not. This is just the beginning of the process for you. And like I said, a lot of what we do is on autopilot. So that means taking yourself off of autopilot and really looking at why you do what you do and questioning why you do what you do. So think of this as the long game. Nothing good comes easy, to quote, I believe, Bob Marley.
And if you haven't already heard of soft skills being referred to as core skills, let us be the first people to say that for you. They're not just soft skills. They're not optional skills. They're skills that are going to make sure that whatever you can do technically actually has an endpoint and has a purpose. If you can't communicate what you're able to do or what you have done, you're not going to have people who are then ending up using what you're creating. You got to be able to communicate. You got to be able to work with your team and work together and make sure that at the end of the day, what you're doing isn't just creating some technical solution for yourself, but something that everyone can use in the way that it was meant to be used.
Awesome. So thank you all so much for letting us chat with you today, or chat at you, as it were. Thank you again to the GRIMMCon team. This was a genuine honor for all of us, and we will be available on Discord for questions if you have any. So thank you again, and I hope we can do these in person again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I just wanted to give you the clap, since I know that it's hard to present to what is essentially your empty living room. But
Oh, my dog's over there. It's fine.
your dog is learning a lot about how to build a diverse community, which I think is great. I mean, the only thing we got 2 questions from the same person, and they were really about, you know, how do we expand our concepts of diversity to also include the Latina population? And so hopefully they will be on the Discord later, and you can talk to them there. I mean, I feel like I'm a little bit of a representative of that community, but also I like to think there's an opportunity here for some sort of virtuous cycle to somehow get sparked into existence. Like, I know we like to talk pessimistically because we're security people, and we see all the problems in life. But I think there's maybe there's a chance that we make enough of a change and it sort of spirals upwards. That's my message of hope. I'm not known for messages of hope.
I too am optimistic. And can I say, I found that to just be an absolutely wonderful keynote. Steph, I didn't know that you were spying on me when I was a 13-year-old in the library looking for young adult books, but okay, I see you.
That's exactly the moment I was describing, by the way. So.
Yeah, I remember looking through the books and be like, oh, that cover looks boring. Definitely passing on that one. But it was absolutely wonderful. All 3 of you just did an amazing job. I actually had multiple people message me saying that it was very good.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for letting us do this.
We were all nervous.
Yeah, thank you so much.